What is your body's stress score? If you're trying to get yourself back into shape, you want to strip a bit of body fat back, you want to get your energy back, you just want to sleep through the night and have the focus through the day. Most people are going to start with their nutrition, they're going to start with exercise, but I want to walk you through why that's really not the first step. And if you've gone through anything like our Fat Loss 5 and really gone through a bit more of an understanding of the structure and how we look at nutrition and training a lot differently, is making sure that there's a lot more to the picture than simply nutrition and training. And bringing that awareness to the other parts of the pie to really make sure that we're addressing that body being back on our side. Because a lot of times when we feel that low energy coming through, it's not just low energy. It's kind of a symptom, it's a signal that something else isn't operating. And when we can address stress as being such a key aspect of today's world that we're not managing all that well, being one of those key hindrances to us actually feeling great, I think it's a really cool place to start. All right. So what I want to walk you through is, look, we've worked with thousands of busy professionals, and this becomes a key framework that allows us to understand what's actually going on and how do we actually get the body feeling good quickly so that what we're doing from a nutrition exercise lens actually starts to work. So the big part I want to look at first from more of a biological aspect here is understanding what we call the pregnenolone steal. Now, what that fundamentally is your body is now prioritizing dumping in its energy into producing cortisol rather than producing our main sex hormones. And you can ask any body composition expert on the planet that if you've got low hormone status, it's going to be very hard to get into ideal body composition or in, lean, well muscled, whatever it might be for you. So if we're in a position where we're stressed out chronically throughout the day, where there's a lot of stress a lot of the time, we're going to notice that our body feels flat, we feel tired, we don't recover particularly well. And this can be a really, really problematic aspect of constantly building or triggering this stress or fight or flight response. When you're looking at it through a nutrition and training lens and you're not seeing the body respond, this one really allows us to get a lot more awareness on why this is not working. Now, okay, so I want to share the screen to give you an awareness of this cycle that we see all of the time, right? And really addressing stress is a very key place to start, allows us to address what's happening at more of a microbial or gut health level to understand where that starts to become an issue, right? Because most people start to understand that when they have really high stress throughout the day, they start to wake up a bit more during the night. Typically, it's later in the night. It's that 3 or 5 a.m. wake up and you can't get back to sleep. The problem with that is now we start to increase those sort of poor food choices through the day. We start to have a bit more stimulants, a little bit more sugar. It could be a bit more alcohol to calm down because we're getting more stressed. It could be a little bit more coffee to wake up because we're a little bit tired, right? The whole cycle starts to repeat. When we start to increase these stimulants and the sugar, then we're going to have further implications at our gut level, right? We're really starting to get out of balance those good and bad gut bacteria, which is going to lead to further leaky gut or inflammatory responses throughout the body, which is only going to increase stress more, all right? So it really becomes a cycle that until we address this human walking through life and how they're getting stressed, what they're getting triggered on, and how long they're getting triggered for, we start to notice a really, really direct link to their gut health, their inability to digest, recover, sleep, stay energetic all day long. So hopefully today's training will be a really, really helpful way for you to understand what fundamentally is stress. I think defining it's going to be very helpful. 2, what can I do about it? Can I understand the different patterns and where potentially parts of my life I'm really shooting myself in the foot? And then what can we do about it? What are the next steps? How do we make sure that we anchor maybe a different awareness, potentially even a definition of stress to move forward? All right. So the first one is I want to start with a really helpful definition that was actually by Jeff Bezos around what stress really is. And I've found this to be the most helpful one online. Stress, from his words, it was stress is something that primarily comes from not taking action over something that you can have some control over. And I thought this was a really, really nice way to look at it. And the concept there, I think it's really, really helpful to define that because we start to get an awareness of, well, if I'm stressed, what is there something in the future that I'm worried about that hasn't happened yet that I might actually have some control over? When I look at that through that lens, it allows me to start to look at what are some of the actions that I might be able to put in place. So keep that in mind as we go through today's training, because when we have a better definition of stress, we know what we're talking about. All right. So where I want to go with this is, I think the really interesting realization is that the people that naturally were super chill and relaxed and don't worry about it, they became extinct pretty quickly, right? Because thousands of years ago, you needed to kind of be on your guard. You needed to be alert. You need to be, what's that? What's in the bush, right? The person that said, don't worry about it, was gone. So it's been programmed into our evolution over time to be something that we're always in a space of, well, there's got to be something wrong, right? What was that noise? What's coming through? And it's a survival mechanism that's not going to change in a couple hundred years, right? Getting an awareness of how that's ingrained into us as human beings and animals in general is that as a natural survival mechanism, we are naturally inclined to look for the negative, to look for what's wrong. And unless we train our body, or at least aware of that inclination to be leaning towards the negative, then we're going to be in a space where we're constantly reinforcing what we think is normal being more and more negative, right? And we know there's people that unfortunately are not aware of it until they're just that grumpy human all of the time and nobody wants to spend any time around them, right? It's a space where we just see the world through a not particularly nice filter, right? So getting back to being grateful in your day, being aware of those little moments that you actually really enjoy, finding joy in your day becomes a really cool way to anchor back in an awareness of your state, that ability to stay calm, to stay grateful, to stay in the moment. And in a lot of ways, that really, at a very physical level, comes back down to managing that state through the day. So understanding where it comes from, knowing that it's very much a natural survival mechanism, and then knowing how potentially we can look into that a little bit more from a day-to-day. One of the key aspects of this that I think is really helpful is addressing how many things in your life and in your world are pulling on that negative response, right? If you look at the news, the reason they're not designed to give you the best quality news, they're designed to get as many views and as many clicks as possible. So they're always going to give you the worst stuff. And because we know our brain is inclined to lean into the stuff that's, oh my God, what happened there? That seems terrible. We're going to lean into so much more of that and we never get the positive. So knowing that this is a natural bias of our brain, we need to start to be aware of what are we consuming on a day-to-day basis. Are we bringing in more positive, right? The pages that we follow. For me, on Instagram, Facebook, the only pages I follow are people that either motivate and inspire me, or two, I find adorable, cute, or joyous in some way, right? So there's, I think it's called the Good News Balloon or whatever it might be, which is only news that's positive in the world, right? And I think it's a really cool way to add that filter. And I'm not being oblivious to there's obviously negative stuff that happens out there, but I'm being very mindful of what I consume, right? It's that mental diet of what am I taking in that's not completely negative, so I'm not seeing the world in a negative way. So really addressing or understanding that we're programmed into that at a very evolutionary level, I think is very helpful to be mindful on a day-to-day that what I'm searching and what I'm naturally seeking. Because if I'm constantly in that fight or flight response and I stay there, I'm not going to be in a position to ever drop body fat, ever recover, or ever sleep through the night. All right, so really cool place to start. The next part I want to go a little bit more esoteric with you, which is the concept of getting rid of shoulds. And I think this is a really big part of stress that I see plague a lot of people, is they think they should be doing something different, or this shouldn't be this hard. And in itself, even if it is a very real stress, you make it 10 times worse because you think it should be different. And what that allows you to do when you remove that word is actually be present in the moment and focus on the problem at hand, rather than creating an additional stress, which is what it should have been on the other side. The grass is always greener. So the concept that I'd like to use here is sad is not bad or good. It's just a human emotion that we feel some of the time, and all of us feel it. But when we feel bad about feeling sad, then we feel sad more often. And I think when you notice those patterns in your life, this goes for any emotion, it's simply the same with stress. If we notice that we're being stressed and we shouldn't be stressed, or this job shouldn't be this hard, or whatever that should might be, I think we start to really build on that problem. We see this a lot in the health space where our body should be changing now. Why is it not changing? I'm forcing this to happen, right? And it literally becomes its own survival mechanism where our body's just simply not going to, it's going to hold on to the body fat. It's not going to change because you're forcing it to make a change. You're creating a must or a should that is in itself becoming its own perpetual stress. So understanding that for humans being these big, smart, imaginary beings in regards to we can think about something that hasn't happened, we start to create all of these scenarios in our head that create its own stress. So rather than it being something physically in front of us, it's completely in our brain in some cases, and we start to build all of this stress, and we're still just sitting in a chair at home, right? Or in the car or at work or whatever the things might be. So being able to remove those musts or shoulds in your day that are causing unnecessary stress, and rather just work on the problem at hand, really in a lot of ways is true mindfulness. It's being present in the moment, dealing with the thing in front of you, whether it's good or bad. It's not about positive thinking. It's about being present in what you're doing and not creating an additional stressor on top of it. So when we start to look at, one of the things that we've looked through a lot of our stress trainings in the past is this concept that stress is a sweet spot. When we get rid of the idea that stress is bad, we can actually reduce its response in our body. And what I mean by that is stress is not a level, it's a threshold. What that means is it can be something that's increased and trained to be higher, or it's something that can be decreased and lowered. And what I'm addressing so far with the shoulds and the must is all these things that we add on top of the actual stressor to reduce that threshold, right? It is in a very real way. If we haven't eaten well, or it's been a really long day and we're under slept, whatever those things are, that's going to naturally reduce our threshold for the next stress that comes along. But if we look on the switch side, if we've had a really great sleep, maybe we did a cold shower or we did a workout or something where we did something a little bit hard, we chose our challenge and we feel unstoppable on the other side of it, the next stressor that comes along, we're actually able to tackle that much, much better than the guy that had 4 hours sleep. So it's a threshold that we can train. And this is where, for a lot of these high-functioning humans that we work with, it becomes something that we're able to address those anchors in our day so we can show up as our best. We're able to show up to the exact same stress in a very different way, respond a very different way, because we're looking at it through what we actually do in reality and managing our mind about how we're approaching that stress. I think that in itself becomes its own superpower, because that morning formula or that night formula or that anchor in your morning to really fuel the day becomes the very thing that improves your stresses or your responses to those stresses in that day. All right, so we've gone through understanding why it's a problem, looking at that biological aspect of it in a very real way. If you don't fix this fight or flight response, you're going to have a really, really tough time dropping body fat and generally recovering or keeping your energy in a good spot. 2, we're actually defining what stress is. It's not just a thing that's there regardless. It's something that we're worrying about in the future. That's something that we may have some sort of control over, right? It allows us to realize that the more stressed we are, the less present we're being. And when we're able to get into that space, we can start to look at, well, 1, we're programmed to look at the negative, so potentially there's a positive here, or how do we look at the actual reality of the situation rather than blowing it up? And 2, how can we look at the actual thing without creating the scenario of what could have happened? Because 90% of the time, those things don't happen and we cause all of this unnecessary stress. So the last thing I want to go through with you today is more of an awareness of, well, there's 2 types of stresses, and it allows us to really understand those patterns in our brain. So we've got our A1 stress, which is there's a stress of a particular event in a couple of weeks. We've got a presentation due and we haven't started on it and we're starting to really stress. Do we have all the resources, all the materials to get ready for that presentation? All right, that's a stress for one particular event. That's not too much of an issue in its essence, provided it's not 3 years away and we're stressing out it the whole time. The second part here is the A2 stress. And ultimately what that is it's a pattern or it's a continued stress. It's a constant state of that CNS arousal or that constant fight or flight response. And I'll give you an example that's a very real world, something that we probably all can at least resonate with, which is we dive into our emails and we get one of these emails that comes from a customer or an employee or a business that really stresses us out, demanding money or something's gone wrong or whatever the thing might be. And you're like, oh, that was a really big thing and I really had to figure this out. And I probably checked it 6 a.m. in the morning and it stuffed up the rest of my day because I was stuck in this heightened response. And then our brain remembers that pattern, right? And then we go into our emails the following day. And before we've even read an email, we feel more stressed, right? And we get another email like that and it's 2 days in a row. And, I now associate emails with this really, really stressed response, right? And then you go on day 3 and day 4. And even if you don't have another bad email in there, you've still got that response where you're still breathing a little fast. You're still waiting for that horrible message to come through, right? It's a pattern. It's a stressor that comes through. And it can happen in so many different environments. It could be a childhood trauma. It could be an argument that you had. It could be a certain sound or situation or environment that just really triggers that response from whatever it might be that becomes that pattern. And when we start to address, there's actually no longer a really crappy email in my inbox. I've just got that association with something 12 months ago. You start to look at how we navigate our way through the day, and so much an automatic response. And many of you will know this now that 90% of our day we do on autopilot, right? We come home, we crave the same thing. We drive to work, and half the time we weren't even paying attention, but we got to work, right? As soon as we try to change something in our breakfast or in our routine, we find it uncomfortable because we're breaking the unconscious. We're breaking what's just a normal pattern in the day. And stress is so ingrained into that environment of what we just naturally get triggered by, naturally what heightens us. And again, if we come back to the evolutionary standpoint, we know that when we go down to the drinking hole, we know that's a dangerous place. We need to be a little bit more heightened. So those patterns are going to be so ingrained to who we are. But now it's just going down and clicking a button and looking at our emails, right? It's no longer actually walking anywhere. So being aware of where those states and where those patterns arise in your day starts to give you a very good understanding of the way to address the unhelpful triggers in your day. And you're not going to remove all of them, nor should you. When you look at not having enough stress, you're bored. When you have too much stress, you're burnt out. We want to find somewhere in the middle. We want to find the problems that really bring you joy. And I think for me, that's been a really nice way to redefine it. And if anything, might be the action from today, which is the quality of your life is the quality of problems that you can solve. For me, I love solving problems for my clients where they're doing amazing things in their work. They're raising amazing kids, but their body's not quite working and they can't find a way to fit it back in their day. What's it going to be? It's no longer, I need to do some more planning or I need to do some meal prep. What's the thing and how can we make this happen every week as a reliable system that you can lean on? That's a really fun system for me. For you, that might be really boring or really complex or whatever it might be. But find that problem that you like solving, because the people I'm talking to at the moment, there are a couple of guys I'm really enjoying working with that are looking at exiting their business over the next couple of years or finding a way to create some more systems so that they're not stuck in the day-to-day. And the simple question I asked them was, what the hell are you going to do when you finish business? Well, I don't really know. I haven't thought about that. And the question I come back to is, well, let's find a really good problem to chew on, right? Let's look at something that you really enjoy doing. And when we have that purpose, we have that drive, I think that's really what keeps humans alive, right? And as soon as, if you look at the one point in society that the mental decline really comes in, it's when people retire, right? And this is getting a little bit tangential, but I'll bring it back around, which is that awareness that when we lean into the fact that it's not about sitting on the beach sipping margaritas, it's about finding a purpose and a stressor, a problem versus worth pursuing, I think it becomes a really beautiful way to reassociate those challenges and those stresses as your own character building experience of finding the next target, finding the next goal, because it's never the completion of a goal that's the win or the fun, it's actually the pursuit. In most cases, people win the medal, do the trophy, whatever, and then they feel a little bit low. They feel a bit, I don't know what my next thing is. It happens all the time. The classic post-competition blues. I've had it 5 or 6 times and I'm finally starting to understand the theme, right? So bringing awareness to choosing the problems in your day. In a lot of ways, I look at it as when something really comes up quite stressful, this is a character building moment, right? There's no way that a plane gets off the ground without resistance against those wings. And if you want to build into that next thing that you're working on or just chipping away at really finding something that excites you in life, you have purpose, you have a passion that you're building towards, you're always going to have a friction point. You're always going to have some sort of pressure against you, and that is stress. And I think that allows you to reassert what fundamentally stress means to you, gets rid of the musts and the shoulds and this natural tendency towards the negatives, and it starts to really build you back towards the, yeah, that's challenging, I'm going to lean into that and I'm going to be a better person for it. All right, that's the best thing I can give you for this. There's a lot of systems we can lean on, and being able to create a space where you're not just looking at willpower and being more disciplined, but rather having systems in your day. We talk about that all the time, but fundamentally when it comes back to stress, your association of what stress is, where it comes up in your day, and how often you're letting that pattern continue to show itself, I think is fundamentally the problem. So hopefully today was helpful. It gave you an awareness of where stress comes through. And if you want an action step or an awareness of what next steps to take to actually apply this stress framework into your life, just comment stress below. We've got a full A to Z 1 to 5 framework, or step 1 to 5, to walk you through what we'd do with a client in this particular space to really reduce stress and maximize how that body operates on a day-to-day level. I hope you enjoyed today's training. I thoroughly enjoyed putting it together. It gives us a lot of awareness into the human psychology and understanding of how we operate through the day, and it's a big part of what we coach. So hope you enjoyed it. Talk again soon. Bye.